What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fresh Podcast, where we bring everything fresh in entertainment. I am your host, Drew Brumfield. Join with me just with one very special guest. It is Randy. Randy, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it is good. We missed a week, but we are back talking about kind of an older game, but still a very fun one. Me and Randy had the opportunity to do a little co-op playthrough of a not co-op game, which is Xcom 2. A bit of a turn-based, it's an RPG. Turn-based RPG, kind of strategy game, which normally I'm not like super into. I'm a very like big like chess player, and I like that. But usually in video games, I like more like action-based stuff. But I had a lot of fun with like XCOM, especially its combat and it's like creating characters and all that. But quick before we get into this, I want to shout myself out and give a quick thanks to everyone who is supporting the channel, and especially supporting our like TikToks and YouTube shorts. Recently posted a Mortal Kombat video that just broke over 10K views, which is super great. It means a lot to me. So if you are watching those, means a lot. Thank you. And I'm sure there'll be a link somewhere to more of our shorts if you want to see that. So yeah. With that said, that is not the topic of today. The topic for today is XCOM. So, Randy, how did you initially get into the XCOM series? Did you play the first one, or were you like me? You just started with the second?
I ended up just playing the second one. I got into it, I believe, is just one summer. One of my friends, Matt, he had it, and we had a thing to where it's like on Xbox you could do like a home library, and like if you had like multiple Xboxes in like different locations. So we kind of cheesed it, and he's like, so that way I basically had his library of games, and vice versa. And he had XCOM 2, and I was just like, oh, this seems interesting. And then I started playing it, and I got really into it. And it was
Yeah.
just from then on, I was just like, oh, this is really fun. I think I've played through it. I think I've started a bunch of times, and then I did eventually finish it a couple years ago. And then we started playing it in a non-co-op way, but via the power of the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, the way that it was funny the way we started it, because I came to visit you a 4th of July, because I just last minute didn't realize that I actually had 4th of July off, because I normally don't. I normally do work holidays. It was weird. But I was off, and I was like, well, we'll come down to visit. And just kind of in our free time in between doing stuff, we were just like, hey, let's find something co-op. And I never played XCOM, and you booted it up, and because what always stopped me from playing it was I was like, I'm going to get really bored with like the base management stuff and all that and min-maxing. But you like that stuff. You like that.
Yeah.
Doing all that. So we just took turns of just like, yeah, Drew, you play it and like play the actual story things like in the combat.
Missions.
Yeah, the missions. And then I just hand the controller off and just like, you make the decisions for me. I'll trust your best judgment of like what's good or not.
Yeah.
And and there were even times where it's just like, you asked like which one would I prefer more when you were doing base, and I asked like which one would you think more like when we were doing it. So it was a really fun, like we played that first session when I was at your place. We played that game for like, God, it must have been like over 4 hours or something. Like we were getting
Yeah, it's
through
quite a
it,
while.
and it was super fun. And I remember like leaving. I'm just like, dang, I'm not gonna be able to finish this playthrough. Like I really liked the characters we made and whatever. So eventually we just we turned to a thing where it's like you hopped on Discord, screen shared, and you had to be the one like doing all the controls the entire time, but I would be telling you what to do if it was ever my turn to play. And yeah, we finished through, and it was super fun to do.
We ended up with a lot of iconic characters.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh, who can forget good old Thomas? What our kind of
Yeah, Thomas, which was, we didn't create the name.
no.
The game made that, because pretty much like you get these recruits and whatnot, and like you can make a custom character pool that it'll pull from. but we hadn't done that yet. And one of the first people that we got was just this guy named Thomas Thomas. We were just like,
Person.
all right, very good name generation.
It
Nice
was
job.
he was hilarious. He was skittish and shy, and he was adorable.
It was great.
And his little voice lines after he got killed, like, that'll show him. I'm like, oh my god, you're great. But yeah, we had Thomas Thomas. Then we also had who can ever forget Richard the Tickler.
Richard.
Yes,
Because that's one thing. Your characters get nicknames,
yeah,
and I think his was Tickler for some reason.
yeah, it was Tickler, and he was like a demolition guy, like an explosive dude. So we made all of his weapons pink.
Yeah.
But he did have you can also gain bond with soldiers. So my like in story was like, oh, he married his fellow soldier Anne, aka Top Shelf, who eventually we made into like the pistol sniper.
Yeah, because you have like your characters. I guess we'll get to that in leveling up, but
Yeah.
like you pretty much have these two branches that your characters get to level up through, depending on their class. So.
Yeah, and we had a bunch of other things, and not everyone was character generated. Obviously, we made ourselves. There were two versions of me because the first one didn't work
Yeah,
out too
there's
well.
just Drew B was initially,
Yeah.
and then is Drew 2B2.
Yeah, yeah, we had Drew two B2. I always put a mask on my face because I didn't like any of the faces. And we had obviously yourself. We had your boyfriend Will, who was the ultimate elite
MVP,
killer.
honestly.
He killed almost every time there was a boss somehow, and we weren't doing this on purpose. You would always get the final kill every time. You would get the final kill, and then we have some other iconic characters like Darth Vader and Barbie from the Barbie movie. Ken was there too, but he wasn't as good.
Yeah,
And a couple
he was just Ken.
Yeah, and anywhere else he'd be a 10, but this is XCOM, and
So he's just Ken.
He's just Ken. God, I'm so terrified for Halloween this year, Randy, because every single dude is going to dress up like Ken at the end of the movie, and every girl is going to be Barbie. And I'm going to get so sick of it.
Enjoy.
And oh my God, Broadway is going to be a nightmare here in Nashville. Anyway, we'll get to, that is kind of, so getting into like general thoughts, and to me, I think that is like the heart and soul of XCOM. It's like the thing that we just talked about. It has really good gameplay, and just the character creation and the fact that like you get names and you get attached and you start making your own story is really what sells this game. That said, though, it's not perfect. Its actual real story is kind of bare bones and very forgettable. Like, aliens are attacking, go kill the aliens, and that's it.
Maybe part of that is because we didn't play the first one. There was definitely callbacks to the first one so that like I understood what they were doing. They're like, hey, yeah, this happened in the first one.
Yeah.
But
remember this dude? And we're like, no.
nope, not at all. But I see what you're going for.
Yeah, it just, I don't know, it kind of seemed like it was just like alien invasion. You have to fight them off. There wasn't twists and turns and doing all. Which, I mean, with this style of game,
fine.
Yeah, it's fine because like none of your like there are characters in the base that like you'll talk to, whatever. There's like this squadron captain, like military dude. There's this engineer who apparently her dad died in the first game. Get over it. And then there's this other scientist who loves performing autopsies on the aliens. And
yeah, he's real excited about it.
He's a little too excited. It's a slightly concerning, but like none of them really stand out and are like, there isn't really like that interesting of people. And even in terms of like villains, the only interesting, there's character design, like in terms of like who you're fighting, they're interesting. But in terms of like the actual antagonists, the only ones that like have any personality are the Chosen, which are these like 3 elite soldiers, which I'm pretty sure they even were DLC. They weren't base game. But even then, they're not.
Yeah, they were DLC.
Yeah, they were DLC, and like they were interesting, and like they had some character, but it's nothing. It's nothing groundbreaking. It's nothing like super engaging. But that's kind of my. What are your kind of general thoughts about the game, Randy?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the story was maybe like is kind of bare bones, but I think that's fine. Um, I think it comes down to the gameplay and some of the like crazy things that can happen, or the tense moments of being like, all right, this person has to like nail this shot, and then it happens, and you're just like, yeah, that sort
He
of
hit
stuff.
the 30%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like, it's a tough shot, but if he makes it, like, this will save our ass. So,
And then the
um,
exact opposite happens where it's like, oh, it's a 99% shot, and somehow it misses, and you're like,
how?
how? How? He's 2 feet away from you, Thomas Thomas. What is wrong with you? This is why this man has schizophrenia.
T- Yeah,
Yeah. Fun times. So,
but yeah, it comes down to the actual gameplay itself and the leveling up, um, and kind of the progression you get from the start of the game to where you're like, oh God, everything is terrifying, towards the end where like stuff is still terrifying, but you feel a lot more confident facing it.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean it's a really fun game. More people should play it.
Yeah. No, the game gets easier and the enemies get a lot less scarier when you have a wrist-mounted rocket launcher that goes halfway across the map. All of a
Yeah,
sudden,
that tends to help.
all of a sudden things aren't as scary. Um, but no, I also one of the things I also really enjoy is like, and even though it's really just like it's a point and click thing, like it's not like super.
Yeah, you could play the
Yeah,
game entirely with just like a mouse, pretty
yeah, no,
much.
you could. I
A
mean, that's
mouse and a little bit for camera controls and
yeah, no,
like
it's you
WASD,
could play
and
this
you're fine.
one-handed. Which I'm pretty sure on our first playthrough I was eating freaking moon pies because we were in Chattanooga and I was eating moon pies while playing this game
Yeah, because Moon Pie General Store.
because the moon
Anyway,
pie general store. But yeah, but I love how diverse each of the classes are, and not just like the that one class, but how different the tree can get them. Even though it really is just like two branches, uh, it makes them feel like different characters. Like for example, we had both you and Will, who are both engineers, and you get this little drone. But we made you a healer, and Will has like all this combat stuff. He can hack things. He can, do this big disruption thing. So it's incredibly useful and almost like necessary to be like, okay, you you can't just make every ranger like one of the sword guys. You also have to go the other class. You can't make every demolition focus on the rocket launcher. You have to focus on like the machine gun or whatever. So it's like it encourages like diversifying your team and like exploring and trying different things, which is probably also why like so many people replay the game so many times.
yeah,
Yeah. So that's really fun. On top of also like getting extra weapons, getting extra outfits, putting Thomas Thomas in a snake outfit that I think looked amazing. I don't think you were as
it
big a
was
fan.
horrid.
It looked great. We I should make that the thumbnail. I should make Thomas like well, we should maybe that's what I'll do for the thumbnail. We'll go in a game and have all of you like take like a screenshot of like the main squad or whatever. Posted
I
on
would say that's one thing in the game. They have
yeah.
those like mission complete like posters, and like so you could do that.
Yeah.
Use one of those maybe.
If they whatever is the one I think like me and Thomas like high fiving or whatever because that was the other thing we did in our playthrough, which I find like very funny, is like there were some bonds that just weren't meant to be. Specifically, you and your in real life boyfriend Will had like
Yeah, it comes down to like class. They don't want two
yeah,
people of the same class um to be bonded.
but you were like
They're like it's not compatible, and I'm
you
like just let it happen.
you were Will tried to be compatible with everyone else. I remember it was me first, and then it was one of the Outriders, and I think it was Max. And you're just like, no, everyone stop trying to get with my boyfriend.
Leave my boyfriend alone.
Use mine. But yeah, that's really where like the game shines and like diversifying and like doing all that. And then it also has like a lot of like very diverse like enemies and different kind of things like that. So, Randy, question for you: what are kind of like the standout enemies, or the ones where you're just like, Oh God, this thing again.
Okay, so there's a mission type where you're both basically like this like civilian outpost is getting attacked,
Mhm.
and you're supposed to go around and like save civilians and whatnot. One of the things I think it's called the Faceless is what they're called.
Mm.
But basically it shape shifts and so it looks like a civilian you're supposed to save. So you can like send a soldier over because pretty much the civilians have a small ring around them that you're supposed to go like stand in to
Yeah.
be like, all right, you're saved
Yeah,
or
like a little
whatever.
pat on the back.
Um, yeah, just go over there and be like, good job, you're saved. Um, you could send a soldier over there, and then it turns out to be a faceless, and then oh no, there's this giant enemy directly on top of you.
You
And you're
just
like, well, shit.
uh,
Those ones are
yeah.
pretty scary. I know for on my first playthrough, I didn't have the War of the Chosen DLC. Um, I forget what they're called, but it's those kind of gold, black and gold
Oh,
enemies that can fly up into the sky and like
yeah.
shoot those pillars down. Like those things were pretty difficult. They'd always be a pain in the ass to hit. They had such like high defense,
I
so your
remember
percentage was always
I
a
remember
pain.
in this specific playthrough, we never had an issue with that. Mainly because I think we always had at least like one sniper, but also I think because at the start of the playthrough, you were like, those things suck. So I just always saw, every time I saw one, I just like, all guns on that thing now.
Yeah.
And so like we never really had an issue because we always just shot it down immediately before it went in the sky. There were a few times, but like most of the time, it died.
Yeah,
I,
it was not great
yeah.
to fight against.
I know for me, the one that always stands out are those freaking snake guys that will like,
Oh yeah, those suck too.
yeah, that will like, like whip you forward towards them, and you're like, oh my god, no, I was in a great position. And there was, gosh, I remember, I think the hardest enemy we fought outside of like, well, we'll get to the chosen, and they're bad, and the final mission's hard. But I think one of like, especially since it was early on, one of the hardest things that we had to fight was this freaking like boss snake, and I forget what it was, like a specialized enemy that
Oh
every time
yeah,
you move,
it's like a modified version.
yeah, it was a modified version of that snake, and that thing sucked. I hated that because every time you moved, because normally you can move all your guys, and then it's the enemy's turn, and then you move. It's like chess. Well, actually, no, that's not at all how chess is played. But you get the, but like you move all your guys, then they move all theirs. The way this guy works is you move one of your guys, and then it'll immediately move again. So it's you can't like corner it or like get in position, and it sucks. And I remember like we eventually killed it. We got it super low one time because I had a frost grenade. We just froze it and then laid into it the first time we saw it. And the second time, because we made the mistake of like we had one squad that was super strong, and then a B squad that was like not that strong, and it attacked our B squad, and we're like, oh, yeah,
This is unfortunate.
we were really close to losing like Guile from Street Fighter, and like I think her name was like Justice, one of like the solar like magic. I know it's not magic, but basically magic type users, like the
Yeah, psionic.
yeah, psionic things. Yeah, that thing was a nightmare to fight against, but luckily once you killed it once, it didn't have to do it again. So yeah, I'd say like the snake ones for me. Another standout kind of like enemy was the these like acid like tank things that would have the ability to like once you deplete its health bar once, it had like a second phase that you had to do.
Oh yeah.
And I remember the first time we fought it, we didn't realize it. We blew so many resources into like killing that first one. Like it has another phase, and it just sucked. It ended up actually being a benefit because on the very last mission, we had Darth Vader who had mind control, and so we took control of one of them, and then later on in the mission, you get a different soldier that like also could mind control a character for sword sides. We had two of these things on our side, and it was great. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Just
cheat. This almost felt like cheating. It was great. So that was super fun to deal with. But those enemies were like always the ones that like stood out to me. On top of obviously like the Chosen, which was honestly, I don't know. I don't think this game would be as good without that DLC. Like the fact that they could
yeah, they were like really good, to
yeah,
be honest.
the fact that they could just pop up in like almost any mission and just like gotta change the game plan for these guys, and like all three of them are like very unique, especially in the way you fight them. Ironically, and this might just be me, but if or just because like it was early in the game, but I feel like the hardest one to fight is the first one. Would you agree with that, or?
I'd agree because she could pretty much turn invisible pretty much after every action. So trying to follow her around was really difficult.
And Overwatch, which normally is like a defensive stance where you shoot anything that moves, doesn't work on her. It just does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a pain for sure.
And just the other two just felt like tame around it, but those are like the only enemies where like you get some real like character out of them. Like they're like a brother sister pair. One's an assassin, one's a sniper, and one's this like warlord that like summons more enemies. And those are the only because like the actual like aliens themselves never really talk to you or like give you much character. These are the only ones that like give something. It's not a lot. Most of it's just like them shit talking you, and then
Just be like, I'll get you.
I'll get you, I'll get you, Spider-Man, and that's it. But it's something. It's a little effort.
Yeah.
So they were definitely fun to fight and a good addition. The other addition with the DLC is the enemy, which is the Lost, which is almost like a completely different faction. That's like zombie based, and they're actually a really cool like gameplay mechanic. If you wanted to talk about the Lost for a minute,
Yeah, so the Lost are basically zombies in essence. And so pretty much you would have it to be anytime you got a kill on one, you'd be able to take another action for free. And so being able to do that really kind of, and usually they didn't have that much health, but having it be like that definitely made you want to like have high capacity in regards to like have a lot of extended magazines and whatnot. Because it can get into a sticky situation for sure, trying to fight them. But also a plus for them is they'll also attack the enemy. So it wasn't always super bad.
yeah, they had some really cool missions and like very cool like. Because anytime the environment where you fought the Lost, it was always like abandoned like apartments or like city areas, and it was a nice like break up from most of the time like some forest or some random like facility out there. So it was a cool area, and along with that DLC came three very different classes that like upgrade differently, which was the Outrider, which in my opinion, like she was my personal favorite. This kind of like stealth operator who could, even when like the rest of your people were seen, she would stay concealed. She could run super far and we gave her really high accuracy, so she would just always hit her on top of already hitting her shit.
Yeah.
And she was super. There was one instance where we pushed her a little too far forward against the Chosen, and she was like again like the entire length of the map away from anyone. That was on me. That was some poor decision by me, but I think overall she was like my favorite of the three. And the other two were Mox, or as we called him, Max. Yeah, we didn't.
It was basically like a turned like a good guy, like one of the.
What are the aliens called?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
Like I said, maybe not the most memorable story. It's just the aliens.
Yeah, the aliens. He was a good one of the aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we weren't. I don't think Max liked us that much.
No, we put him in danger a lot.
Yeah, every mission became a running gag that no matter what mission we were on, Max was getting shot at least once.
Yeah, he was having a bad time.
Yeah. To the point where like the game, like his class is designed to be like, oh, you're supposed to like give him a grenade so you can like use it multiple times and stuff. And we're like, no, he needs the med kit and extra armor. Like, we immediately gave him like points where it's like he can do like return fire because like we're not even gonna change our playstyle with him either. We're just going to accept the fact that Max is gonna get hit. It just that is
Yeah.
how it is. The game did not want Max alive. And kind of the last like faction that you get, and I think you get them like way later, is like the psyops class and the what was it? It was like Volt. That's what it was. We're like this kind of melee based class where you run up and you start building energy to like get more and more powerful. And I feel like she was like really interesting.
She was kind of like psionic, kind of was
Yeah.
supposed to be it, but yeah, she was very melee based.
Which is like cool and interesting, but like I feel like it was either like we got her like way later, or maybe just like we just need to do a better job of like diversifying our team. I feel like we didn't use her like nearly as often as like we used like Outrider or Max. Like we
That's
used them,
true.
yeah.
We ended up not using her as much.
So that might, I don't know if that's more on us, but like it's kind of weird that like because like they're all based on like these extra factions, and it's weird that like we got the Outriders and what Max's class like first, and then like 3 missions later, it's like, oh, by the way, there are these other guys, and it's like kind of strange that like they weren't all introduced. I guess maybe for like balancing reasons, you don't introduce all 3 of them at the same time. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But it's just kind of, it was strange. Yeah, we didn't get to really properly use Volt as much as like maybe we kind of hoped to use it because she's a fun class and did a lot with that. So I guess now my kind of, Randy, we talked a little bit at the beginning about each of our favorites, a few of our like favorite people, but so I'll ask you to and we had a bunch of teammates, so do not feel free to, state a one, but like who were kind of your favorite like squad mates? Who were your favorite people that like we played with?
Okay, so I think I really enjoyed actually playing with we ended up having Barbie on our team,
Yeah.
and she ended up being like a super good sniper, to be honest, because we ended up uh doing the opposite of what we did with Top Shelf, which for
Yeah.
Top Shelf we made her
I think
kind of a like pistol
yeah. We
like
did kind of go
gunslinger.
like back and forth. Chop Shelf whole thing. She didn't have too much in one. She would go back and forth, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But then Barbie, we did all like pure sniper, which I really wanted to do because I knew how effective it was in the
yeah,
game. Um, and I don't know, she was just really satisfying to like hit these like hit these big shots that needed to be made. Um,
She also
and
had
then
a
also,
really broken ability of just like I forget what it was called, but just after you got one kill, you keep going until you finished killing people.
yeah, I mean, that was like the last level.
Yeah,
Basically, once like the last level you get as you max out, like, yeah, she gets to do some crazy stuff
but yeah,
for sure. But
yeah. Sorry, who
let's
else
see
did
who
you
else.
say?
I
Yeah.
think, I mean, a little bias, but I guess not really because he did do so much work. Will's character was insane. Um,
I'm surprised. I'm also surprised you didn't say. I thought you were gonna go a little biased myself.
yeah. But yeah, like he put in a lot of uh really good kills and whatnot. He had an ability where basically, if you use in your turn all of your movement, you go into Overwatch anyway. So that was actually super nice to allow him to be able to like catch up to maybe where we're moving the frontliners up, and then allow him to catch up and be like, okay, like we still have someone on Overwatch, and we ended up always giving him like these rounds that
Mm.
were had a higher crit chance, and
I
then
think
we
they're equipped
modified
like
his
that.
gun to also have higher crit chance.
Yeah.
So that's why he would just come out and be like, "Oh, I'm on Overwatch. Oh, someone moved over there trying to attack our guys. Boom, 11 or 12 or whatever." And it's just like, "Oh, that's quite a large chunk out of the enemy's health."
It's like,
And or would just kill it.
yeah. God, I remember there was one time where like we just had everyone on, like, because enemy, like, we knew where they were going to spawn, and like, well, we couldn't make it to the objective, so we just had Will run up there and a few other people on Overwatch, and just the second enemies showed up, just immediately at least one of them will always get gunned down or just shot, because Will's didn't miss a lot and had crit rounds. And on top of that, also had a drone that could like fly forward and do a guaranteed 4 damage on anything. Or eventually his ult, we would just do a big pulse. Yeah, Will was doing some numbers. Will was definitely doing numbers.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll throw it back to you because I'm sure there's definitely more people. We had a bunch more people on the squad we'll talk about, but I had to talk about him. Our main man, who we referenced at the beginning, Thomas, was definitely a fan favorite for me, because he's just a silly little guy of just like a really dumb name who were just like, you're gonna be a main character now, buddy.
Just because of your name.
Just because of your name. And it made it great because like he was a ranger, he was a shotgun class, so he'd always be running forward. And we eventually he had this axe that he would throw, and eventually gave him a sword. And what made it really good, because he had like a shy personality, at one point in the playthrough he got like basically schizophrenia of just like, for like a good like couple, like what felt like, because in the game there's like a day system where you can like progress through time. For like a good like what felt like weeks, he was just like, I really don't want to go, like just terrified to go back out on missions. But we were just like, Thomas, you are our highest level person. You are the closest to captain rank. We need you to get over your fear and go kill some aliens. But he was great. And then I remember after we killed that stupid, annoying like snake boss I talked about earlier, I was like, hey, can't we like make that thing into armor? And you're like, I guess. And we made it and put it on Thomas, and you're like, this looks ugly. And I'm like, keep it.
Yeah, I was like, this is awful.
It was definitely an outfit Randy never would have like kept going. And I'm like, okay, but look, it has a grappling hook. It also has a freeze hook that doesn't take your turn, and like a bunch of other like things. I think even at the end he had less health than everyone else, but like because of like Thomas's build, because Thomas had a unique ability. I mean, not unique. Any ranger could have gotten this ability, but the ability that like if he got a kill that round, he would become untouchable. So Thomas would be,
Yeah, which was great.
yeah, very much in the front lines, freezing people, shooting people, and just not hurt. Still, just be fine.
Yeah,
it
he'd
was-
just be straight up in front of people.
Yeah. And then it worked out even better because he'd be untouchable, but he also had Blade Master. So they would miss, and then he would smack them for like 10 damage with his sword.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Thomas was super fun to play through. On top of Thomas, you know, myself, and then also, you know, the tickler, Mr. Pickle, 2 different demolition people who we went down opposite trees, and very useful to have like a rocket launcher that goes like halfway across the map, or a flamethrower that just goes 50 yards forward. Demolition's also a really fun class to do. And the last one I'll talk about before seeing if you have anyone else is probably one of the ones you were going to talk about was Vader. Vader ended up,
Yeah, Vader.
Vader was, we had, his name was like Niles Burns, and I found that funny. And he had a
And
mask.
yeah, his name was Niall Burns, and then the game gave him the nickname Vader. And we're like, well, you're Vader.
Oh yeah, that's what. Yeah, the game nicknamed him Vader, and so we're like, well, we're gonna change it, and so we changed his design to have like a helmet on and a red gun, and we just kept him in that Scion room for like days and days, and he gained all the powers. So yeah, the game became a lot easier when you have Null Lance, and this like
Yeah, for
giant
sure.
destructive field and few and like God, he might have shot his gun like 3 times our whole playthrough because he had so many just like abilities.
I mean, yeah, you could just unload all of it.
Yeah. I
Just be
remember,
like, yeah, you're gonna die now.
yeah, I remember. God, if we played it correctly, we should have had him paired with Barbie. Because that would have been really funny, Darth Vader and Barbie. But no,
Yeah,
he was ended
the
up
true pair.
yeah, the true pair. No, he was ended up pairing with he paired with Outrider, which was okay a few times, but he also had the ability Inspire, which already does the Bond thing, so he didn't really need to be a part of any of the team. So Vader was super fun to play with. What about anyone else you wanted to bring up, talk about?
No, I think that wraps it up, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, because we had a few others. Like we did make Ken. He didn't do very well.
He didn't do much.
One of my favorite missions though was at one point you sent Barbie and Ken on like a training mission. Like we were controlling them, and then ended up like yeah they got swarmed by the Lost, and so it was Barbie and Ken's little escape mission.
Yeah.
We're like oh god, and it was like at very early in the level, so they both sucked. And who would have guessed Barbie would have been, arguably our most valuable person by the end of the game.
Because she's Barbie.
Because she's Barbie and this is her world.
Yep.
I think Barbie ended up getting paired with Valkyrie, which is a different ranger. It was only okay, and then yeah, everyone else was very like one-offs. Like we had like Angela, and then we had Guile from Street Fighter. who
Yeah, for
didn't
some
do-
reason.
Yeah. I saw the haircut, and I'm like, oh, it's Guile, and you're like, who? Because you don't play fighting.
No, I mean, I know who Guile is, but I was like, I still don't play fighting games,
Yeah.
but I'm aware.
You get the culture. You get the idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was like definitely the most fun of just like making people and doing all this. We've talked about a few. Do you have like a favorite like a moment that happened during our playthrough or something that we did? Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like the end was really good and really tense. Like
Yeah.
the end mission is just really well done, in my opinion. Um, Basically, you go through and you fight what's supposed to like you're supposed to shut down the the portal that these aliens are like coming through and whatnot, and you have to fight what's called as an avatar, where basically from the first game, I guess you were taken at one point, and they made a clone of you in essence, and gave you all these like crazy psionic powers,
'Cause
and
you're, like,
all
the
the
best and the
while
best,
through these portals are coming all of these other like enemies that you've been fighting. They just don't stop coming until you pretty much kill the avatar a couple times, and then you got to like get your people out. And it's just I don't know, it's just satisfying. It's that's one thing. The progression in the game is done really well.
Oh yeah. You go from like, oh my gosh, my gun does 4 damage. That's amazing. To like, by the end of the game, we would graze people and that would do 4. And like we had like all these explosions and like everyone could one shot an enemy almost.
Depending on the enemy, but yeah.
Depending on the enemy, like the regular guys.
But yeah, like it's not like the enemies become nothing by any means. But yeah, I think the end. I really enjoyed the end.
Oh no,
What about you?
that final. I mean, just to finish talking about that final mission is, yeah, I remember before we started, you even said like, I'm not helping. You are doing this. And like even before you get to that final part, it is a truck to like you have to go all the way through this base, like conserving resources. That's why I started hypnotizing enemies to like so I could save on like my explosives and resources and stuff like that. And then I remember we had a strategy at the end to like use, because that's the other thing about the end. You get an extra teammate. It's you as like the commander avatar, and he has like some powers and stuff. And he has null lance as well, which is a big line. And I remember at the end we were going to like, okay, we'll double null lance whatever the final boss is to like insta kill him and do, you know, great crazy damage. The problem was when we got there, we realized the final enemy is immune to psionic abilities, so that strategy didn't last very long.
Unfortunately, no.
No, and that I just remember that moment of just like it was because it was early in the morning. Because at this point we played like every day, like getting
Pretty
to
much.
the end, and like it would like long sessions. I remember like it was early in the morning, and I was just like sitting there strategizing because your character Randy was surrounded by like 3 faceless and like 2 of like the things with double health bars, and I'm there with just 1 action, and you're there like can't get far enough away, and we're like, shoot, how do we strategize it? Because like how do we need to make sure Randy stays alive, but also like I kill enough of them so he can just take the damage. And I remember at one point you were like, hey, what time do you have to go to work? And we had to like pause it because we had been playing so long and so carefully that I'm like, oh shoot, I'm about to be late for work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that final mission was so much fun, and like a really good, just like good final test of just like, here is everything at once, like all these enemies just crowding you, and you better hope that you have abilities that can take out multiple at the same time. But I think my favorite, one of the missions, I think the first mission that I felt like it was really like a challenge and had to like strategize for was the first time you see, and it's a DLC thing, but the first time you see the Chosen and like that teleporting thing, because earlier in that mission it introduces you to Outrider and Max, and they're like kind of like, you're like, oh, these guys are amazing and broken, because you use them to fight the Lost, which are pretty easy enemies when it's just the Lost.
Yeah, they just kind of overwhelm you a bit.
Yeah, so you can just get through them like really fast, especially if like you have good accuracy, or a grenade. And remember, you're like, oh, these guys are broken, they're gonna do great. And then remember, the Chosen shows up and just it caused fear and tickle, and it slapped the shit out of I think it was Thomas. I think Thomas like took a lot of damage during that, and it's just like I remember fighting it the first time. Like I was just trying to hunker down, like wait for it, but it would just stay high, and like you have to go find it. And I remember like that first time was the first time I really had to like, okay, I have to start paying attention. Like this is actually like a challenge now. This is hard.
Yeah.
I have to focus. So I think that was like really cool. Yeah. Anything else that you thought of?
No, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
People should check it out. It's a bit of an older game, but just to kind of get other people excited for it, and maybe be like, that new kind of Star Wars game that was kind of announced last year, I think at some point in 2022.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, there's going to be a turn-based strategy Star Wars game. And guess what? It's being made by some ex-employees from Xcom with a little bit of help from Respawn. So, yeah, if that doesn't get you excited, and you're like, I don't know, I assume most of our viewers and listeners are also like Star Wars nerds like us, and they're like, oh, that seems cool, and you kind of want a preview of what that game might be like, go play XCOM 2.
Yeah.
It's like always on sale on Steam, and you can get like the deluxe edition with the War of the Chosen DLC, which you totally should do.
Oh, yeah.
Because it really helps, like it makes the game a lot better.
Yeah, the word shows like it's almost a necessity to have. I also just remembered something as you were bringing it up. I remember we actually first tried to play it with mods and like have our people be like stormtroopers and fighting like clones and stuff. I think the issue was we were trying to install like too many at once, and it kept crashing the game.
Yeah, I think I'm sure you can make it work, but we were on a timeline.
Yeah.
Like since you were there for the weekend and whatnot, so we were like, no, let's just play standard.
It would be cool to like. I think yeah, our issue was like we were trying to put too many into it, and we couldn't find out which was the thing that was causing the problem.
Yeah,
and it would just take too long to get rid of everything else. But like, yeah, I think definitely tried. I think this was XCOM was like such a good game to like start with, and like it's amazing because, like I said earlier, I'm not into these strategy games, and the fact that like I immediately got into it and was like, oh, this is super interesting, super cool. Gameplay stuff. I will admit that like it is. I don't think I would have gone through it or gone as far if I wasn't playing with you and I could just hand it off to you to do all like the base stuff, because that has
Which
always.
I mean, the base stuff is, I think it's pretty fun, but that's me.
But I don't. That's the thing. Like, I don't want to criticize it too much because I don't think it's bad, and it does obviously affect a lot, and you get a lot of cool equipment and gear, and it changes gameplay a bunch. So I understand the necessity. I think that's just me as either a person or a player. Like, that's more a personal issue for it, which is why probably like I. That's why normally those games are hard. So very thankful that I had you to help me get through those parts that I'd go like make a sandwich or something while you're like, all right, we're gonna make our base amazing.
I'm gonna do some base stuff.
I'm gonna do some base stuff. Like, all right, your turn to play. So that's fun. I got last thing before we get into our fresh picks. What are kind of so as you mentioned, they are working on a Star Wars kind of like version of like a top thing. What are some of the things you either hope they bring back, hope they change, hope they do differently for either the Star Wars game, or if they ever eventually do an XCOM 3 or a continuation of like this universe?
Um, I guess I feel like it ended off pretty well. I don't know what they would do in regards to a continuation to this universe.
Yeah.
What they bring over, I hope they bring over. I know you said you weren't super into it, but like I hope they bring over the base stuff and some of the progression because you had to really choose like, all right, what do I need to spend my resources on? What do I need to spend our time researching in regards to what upgrades we're trying to get? So I enjoyed that, and I mean honestly, you could do XCOM with a code of Star Wars paint, and I'd probably buy the shit out of it. Which
Yeah.
is a bit of what those mods were doing. If I wasn't playing 80 different things right now, I'd probably go back and play XCOM and get those Star Wars mods, or
Yeah.
spend some time and get that sorted and play it with all those mods.
That would be that'd be cool. So yeah, I'm excited for the future. I think one of the things that like, and question for you, and I could have looked this up, but like with the future game that's like game made by the future Star Wars game, do we know like what era it's set in or like
No,
anything like
we
that?
don't.
Okay, all we know is it's Star Wars. And
At
it's
least
these
not that I know of.
developers.
So
Okay,
yeah, it's Star Wars, and it's made by XCOM
okay,
developers, with the help of Respawn. So
yeah. So at least for me, as much as like I've been liking the High Republic or Old Republic stuff, I think for me, I think it'd be super cool if you really just like took the mechanics of just like the upgrade system and like how these classes work and being able to like make your own person. If you just really took that and put it in like Clone Wars setting, I think that fits way too. Which is probably why there's like a million mods.
this is
about
why
it.
there's a mods for it.
This is why there's so many mods about it. So it's like probably like the developer saw this and was like, that's easy money. That should be. So honestly, like, I'd be fine with that. I think it would be super cool if like, because it's Star Wars, I think it would also be cool if if you had like, and it'd be broken if you had more than one of these people. So probably the way they would balance it is just like you have one Jedi class and you can customize that guy to like do whatever, different lightsaber and, if they're more force based or lightsaber based. And so you get like one Jedi per mission and the rest are like either demolition clones or sniper clones or maybe even, what could be interesting in a different kind of class is like similar to how they do it in Battlefront, where you have like the commander or like the guy where it's like they can buff out their own squad and like bring assists, but all he has is like a pistol or whatever. I think that could maybe be interesting, kind of something more like stat based, just to throw some diversity into it. Um, add something different. But that's kind of just me spitballing. I think it'd be. I'm super excited. When you were telling me about, hey, these guys like their next game is supposed to be Star Wars based. Which, yeah, no. If after all the podcasts we have done on Star Wars and our most viewed video by far are two on TikTok, two Star Wars videos, one made by me and one made by Seth, each with over like 80K views. Yeah, I think people realize that like, yeah, that's the thing we're into. So I'd be super down for that, and I'm glad that like I actually did play through XCOM and did all that because now I'm more interested in a different like genre of games that I wasn't into earlier. All right. Well, anything else before we get into our fresh picks, Randy?
No, I think we're set to go. I think we've said what we needed to say.
All right. Well, then I will go first with my fresh pick, and it's a bit of a different one. It's a lot of people have been watching this show. It is and most of the time when people hear live action of an anime or any cartoon, they think, oh, it's awful, it's terrible, and immediately think it's bad. But as a lot of people have been saying online, and I'm kind of wanting, that curse has kind of finally been broken with the One Piece live action anime on Netflix. I am not the biggest One Piece fan. For those who don't know, it is the longest running anime ever, and I'd feel safe to say like one of the highest selling animes just in period. Like it's over 1,000 plus episodes. It's still going on to this day. They have like more like big announcements and things and still having, so it's still going, which is wild because to give you an idea, it was coming out at the same time as like Naruto and Bleach, which Naruto was the first anime I ever watched when I was like a kid. And One Piece is older than that. One Piece came out in like 1999, like the anime. The manga is longer. So it's a staple. If you're into anime, you've heard of this. So you also almost certainly heard of the live action thing, which anytime they do live action anything, it usually is awful. Look at Avatar, look at Death Note, look at all this. But One Piece is actually like surprisingly good. Probably because the actual creator of the manga and everything handpicked out this cast and the story and everything. So, well, I don't think he wrote the story for this one. I guess technically he did because it's based off his work. But you get what I mean. He handpicked the cast, so it's like, if you don't like this cast, then like, well, there's no one else that could have picked a better one. But I think all the cast do a good job. They really get the essence of the character. Obviously, they have to change up the story because the original episodes took like 50 plus to get where they're going, and they only have like 5 or 6. So they kind of like fast forward through it, but they still hit like, they understand what's actually important about this anime and why people like it. As for me, I haven't watched all of it. I've only, casually been watching what was on the Netflix thing, but I can see why people are obsessed with this show and why it like captures so many hearts and why so many people say like this is like the best anime ever. That said, it's hard to recommend the anime because, like I said, it's 1,000 plus episodes. It is a life commitment to watch that show. No matter how good it is like everything. But it's way easier now to recommend the live action because it's only like 6 episodes an hour each. It's much more reasonable, and it's still like pretty good as far as like live action animes goes. Not perfect, but it's like, for what everyone was expecting, surprisingly really good. So if you have Netflix and you haven't deleted it because they don't pay their writers, yeah, I'm calling you out, Netflix. Go check out the One Piece live action show. It's pretty good. Randy, what about you?
Speaking of people who don't pay their writers,
Yeah,
Disney.
yeah. Nobody pays their writers.
Yeah, people pay your writers, and your actors. Just
Yeah.
pay people better. Anyway,
If people do a job, you should pay them. I thought that was basic knowledge, but apparently not.
but I've been watching Ahsoka as it's been coming out. I'm sure we'll do an episode probably when it's done. We just got to the halfway point.
We'll just skip
if I
Star Wars.
anyway,
Yeah.
and it's been really enjoyable. Even as someone who didn't watch Rebels, I've been able to follow along pretty well. I did a little bit of just research beforehand to be like, all right, what happened in Rebels? And I got a summary of kind of like, all right, this is what's happened. I've watched some of the like the big episodes from Rebels, but I never watched like an entire series. But I've
Yeah.
been able to follow along pretty well, and it's been super enjoyable. The It's been really great seeing Balin, who's played by Ray Stevens,
Hmm.
and it's like he's been really good in it. Um, I see some people are kind of saying like Ahsoka seems like Dawson is really stiff in the role, but I think that's a little on purpose.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I'm sure as I think that's part of the progression is Ahsoka's supposed to open herself up and like return to kind of how she
Yeah.
was before in comparison to everything that's happened, and she's kind of closed off
Yeah.
at the beginning of the season. I think that's probably where they're going with it. So yeah, it's enjoyable. There's been callbacks to Clone Wars, definitely, obviously callbacks to Rebels, but I'm following along with it. Um, and the lightsaber fights are fun and cool. So
Yeah.
so yeah, check it out and Disney pay your people.
Yeah, no, I agree with both those statements, especially Disney pay your people. But the main one that I want to talk about is like, yeah, there's, as someone who has watched Rebels, it's really fun watching the show and talking to people who like, who these are a good number of people that didn't watch Rebels. And I understand it, but like, it's interesting to see so many people like, no, I still get it, I still like it, and even some people who are like, I think even you at one point said like, I'm kind of interested in Rebels now because there's been a couple of characters that pop up like they seem interesting. Mainly the psychopathic droid Chopper has
Yeah.
become a fan favorite again, which is great. But like watching the show has kind of like reminded me of just like I gave Rebels like a hard time like when it initially came out, and I think I could still stand by some of the criticism. It's a lot more lighthearted than Clone Wars, and it's not as not I don't think certain characters are as fleshed out, but I think after watching like Ahsoka, I'm like, Rebels is actually like a good show because I actually do genuinely care about like 90% of like this found family that they made. Um, and even though like Sabine's character, when Sabine initially came out, she was annoying because she was an everything kind of character. She's like, oh, she's a Mandalorian, and she's an artist, and she's quirky, and she's all this, and she's the smartest in the team, and she's also a Jedi now. And it's like, oh my god, like when people called Rey a Mary Sue, I was like, oh, you have no idea. Sabine was the Mary Sue of everything, but now kind of watching her live action, I'm like, no, I don't think that's true anymore. Because like, yes, she's technically has the Force, but also like she's not good at it. And even looking back at the season, like she's not actually good at being a Mandalorian either. She has all these things in a really cool backstory, but she still has flaws, and I think is a genuinely good character. As for like the complaint about Rosario Dawson, I think she's exactly what Ahsoka should be because that is how Ahsoka is in Rebels. She's not as like because I think people forget that Clone Wars she's a kid and through the series she grows up and becomes an adult, and then by Rebels she is this kind of like the last Jedi master, and she is very like strong and stoic. She'll make like an occasional quip at people, and she still does it in this series. So I think Rosario Dawson is doing a perfect job. Um, and I think like that's a perfect cast. But more than likely, like as the series will progress, she'll also start opening up more and being more like lighthearted to her. After watching the latest episode that is out at the time of recording this. I'm super interested where it's going to go because they've been popped up in somewhere and some characters have popped up that I won't spoil right here, but it's very I remember I had my eyes opened and I was like, oh, I know what that place is, and I don't think I should be telling people that haven't watched Rebels what that place is. So it's super interesting, and I'm really enjoying. Last thing I'll ask you, Ray, before I close it up, and obviously, the series isn't over yet, but how would you compare it to either Andor or Kenobi or like some of the other Disney Plus shows? Are you thinking you're liking it more? Are you more invested, or are you still like, it's Star Wars? Of course, I'm gonna watch it no matter what it is.
Um, I think I'm a little more invested than I don't know. It's kind of I don't know. I think Andor, like if we had to rank, quote unquote, it's still like Andor at the top,
Yeah.
and I think at the moment it's above Kenobi, which is kind of surprising for me to say.
Yeah, that's even because I mean Kenobi is my favorite and one of your favorite characters, and I still really like that show, even though I know a lot of people had its issues. But I don't know. The more I think about it, it's a hard question because I think I agree with you. Where like, of course, Andor stands above all of them. Like Andor is unironically amazing, and everyone that and there's a lot of Star Wars shows out there, but if you're into Star Wars, watch Andor. Like before any of them else, just Andor should be your priority. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. Something about this show is just like, and I don't know if it's just because like we haven't had Jedi stuff like in live action for a while, or the fact that there is so many callbacks to shows that I grew up with that I'm just like, I'm very invested in this story, and I'm very interested to see where it goes. All right.
So am I.
Yeah, I was waiting for the
It'll be good.
response. Yeah. Okay. Well, with that all said, we're gonna keep this a little bit shorter. We've had too many 2-hour podcasts after a while, so we're gonna keep this one nice, right at an hour. It's perfect. And so again, I want to thank Randy for coming on and talking to me about some XCOM.
Definitely is fun. I'm glad we did our co-op playthrough of it.
Yeah, I'm super excited for what these developers have in store for us next. And as always, I want to thank everyone that stood around and listened to this podcast or watched it if you're on YouTube. And if you are on either of those platforms, go check out our shorts, go check out our extra content that we push. It really helps out and it means a lot. So, as always, thank you for watching or listening, and stay safe out there. Goodbye.